6 months ago, 3 people I loved were sentenced to prison for trying to kill me over a $20-9 million inheritance. My husband, Cameron, got 25 years. My sister, Crystal, got 10. My brother-in-law, Ryan, got 15. It all started with a 47-second phone call I made from the parking lot of a law firm in downtown Atlanta. A call that changed everything. But let me tell you from the beginning. From the day when everything finally seemed to be falling into place. My name is Jasmine Reynolds. I'm 34 years old, and this is the story of how my own family conspired to murder me. For 10 years, I was married to Cameron Stone, a man with an easy smile and ambitions always bigger than his ability to fulfill them. I worked at a nonprofit called the Atlanta Human Rights Coalition, making $42,000 a year while paying all our bills. Cameron had a startup that never took off, debts that grew every month, and dreams that turned to dust. But I loved him. I believed in him. I thought we were a team. On that September Thursday, I still didn't know that trust is the most dangerous weapon in a world full of predators. I woke up at 6 a.m. as always, made coffee in an old noisy coffee maker, took a shower in the tiny bathroom with the leaking shower door, and put on one of my 3 pairs of work pants with an old navy blouse I'd bought on sale 6 months earlier. Cameron was still asleep when I left. He always slept late because entrepreneurs work on their own schedule, not the system's. I kissed his forehead, whispered I love you to a man who didn't even stir, and drove my 2013 Honda Civic with 180,000 miles on the odometer to my office downtown. Another ordinary day of paying the bills while he built the empire. At 10 a.m., my phone rang. Unknown number. Normally, I wouldn't have answered, but something made me pick up this time. A professional female voice introduced herself as the secretary from Hayes & Associates law firm. She said that Mr. Harold Hayes urgently needed to speak with me regarding the estate of my Aunt Hattie Washington. My heart tightened. Aunt Hattie had died 3 weeks earlier at 87 of natural causes. Small funeral, just family, in a modest chapel in Decatur. Aunt Hattie was a quiet, almost invisible woman who worked as an elementary school teacher for 40 years and lived in a small house that needed paint. I used to visit her once a month, bring cookies, and we'd talk about the weather and the soap operas she watched. She always gave me $5 when I left. Buy yourself a coffee, sweetheart, as if I were still I never imagined that this woman who clipped coupons and drove a 90s Buick had anything more than a modest pension. The secretary scheduled a meeting for that same afternoon at 2 o'clock. I told Werg it was a medical emergency and drove to the address she gave, a glass and steel skyscraper on Peachtree Street, the financial heart of Atlanta. The kind of building only people in expensive suits carrying Italian briefcases go into. I rode up to the 23rd floor in a silent elevator that smelled like expensive perfume and ambition. The reception area of Hayes & Associates was all silver and gray tones, gleaming marble floors, abstract paintings that probably cost more than my car. The blonde receptionist looked me up and down with that familiar expression that clearly said, "You don't belong here." She made me wait 15 minutes in a leather chair so soft I nearly sank into it, flipping through a Fortune magazine without absorbing a single word. Places like that always made me feel small, inadequate, poor. Finally, an elegant black secretary in a perfect navy blue suit led me down a long hallway to a room with floor-to-ceiling windows, a spectacular view of the whole city. That's where I met Mr. Harold Hayes. He was exactly what you imagine when you think powerful old money attorney. A white man in his 70s with perfectly combed silver hair, a 3-piece gray suit that screamed $5,000, gold cufflinks, and a discreet but unmistakable Rolex. His office smelled of aged leather, expensive books, and a faint touch of Cuban cigar. He greeted me with a firm handshake, offered coffee. I declined because my hands were already shaking and pointed to a leather chair across his massive mahogany desk. "Ms. Reynolds," he began in a deep, formal voice, "thank you for coming on such short notice. I represent the estate of your Aunt Hattie Mae Washington. I was her personal attorney for the past 25 years. That shocked me. Aunt Hattie had a personal attorney. Aunt Hattie, who bought paper towels only on sale in reused plastic bags? Your aunt was extremely private about her financial affairs," he continued, opening a thick leather folder. Not even close family knew the true extent of her assets. My heart started beating faster. Assets. She invested wisely over many decades. Started small in the 70s, bought property when the market was low, consistently invested in solid companies, reinvested dividends, and lived well below her means. He studied me carefully, as if assessing whether I was ready for what was coming next. She created an irrevocable trust 15 years ago and named you, Jasmine Marie Reynolds, as the sole and exclusive beneficiary. He slid a thick document across the polished table. I looked down and saw her name printed elegantly across the top. Hattie Mae Washington Irrevocable Trust. Ms. Reynolds. His voice cut through my daze. The trust is valued, after taxes and legal fees, at approximately $29 million. The world stopped. Completely stopped. The traffic down on Peachtree fell silent. The hum of the air conditioner disappeared. Even my heart seemed to stop beating. I stared at him, mouth open, unable to form words. "I'm sorry," I finally managed to whisper. $29 million, he repeated calmly, as if telling me the weather forecast. The trust becomes yours entirely after standard legal processing, approximately 30 days. After that, you will have full control of the assets, $29 million. The number was so absurdly large, so far beyond any reference of reality I had, that my brain simply refused to process it. I worked 40 hours a week, 50 weeks a year, earning $42,000 annually. It would take nearly 700 years to earn that much. 700 years. The math was so ridiculous, I almost laughed. My hands began shaking violently. Mr. Hayes kept talking about federal and state taxes already paid by the trust, diversified investments in commercial real estate across Atlanta, a blue-chip stock portfolio, accounts in 3 different banks. None of it landed. My head spun, my stomach churned, tears began to form in the corners of my eyes. All I could think, in a looping, obsessive chant, was, finally, life had turned around. Finally, the universe had noticed Ms. Jasmine Reynolds, the girl from East Point who fought for every penny, always the less successful one compared to my sister Crystal, who married rich and said, "Your turn." Finally, Cameron could pay off his mountain of credit card debt from that startup that never launched. Finally, I could stop eating instant noodles for lunch while he went to business dinners. Finally, we could breathe. I had no idea that finally actually meant the beginning of my nightmare. I left the office at 2:45 p.m. in a dazed trance, went down 23 floors without registering it, crossed the marble lobby without seeing anything. Walked 3 blocks to the underground parking garage where I'd left my Honda, paying $12 for parking something that would normally irritate me but now seemed laughably insignificant. $12. I had $29 million. The disconnect was so absurd I almost laughed again. I got into my car, sat in the cracked synthetic leather seat with the popped spring I'd learned to avoid, and just sat there in the warm, stale silence of the garage. The air smelled of exhaust and gasoline. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered faintly, casting strange shadows. I could hear the distant echo of engines starting, doors slamming, muffled voices. I looked at the worn steering wheel, at the rearview mirror where a cheap pine-scented air freshener hung, long since odorless, at my hands trembling uncontrollably in my lap. And then, with a sudden and overwhelming clarity, I thought, I have to tell Cameron now. Immediately, before I explode. I grabbed my iPhone screen cracked in the upper corner, couldn't afford to fix it for 3 months, sand opened my contacts, Cameron Huslin, with the ridiculous little heart emoji that always embarrassed me but I never changed. I tapped it, my hands shook so much I had to hold the phone with both. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heartbeat that thudded so loudly I could hear it in my ears. Pressed the green call button. The phone rang. Once, twice, on the 3rd ring, he answered. But before I even heard his hello, I heard the background, and the background told me a story I should have noticed but completely ignored in the blinding euphoria of the moment. Loud music thumping R&B, something by Usher or Chris Brown. Female laughter. Multiple women, high-pitched, cheerful, uninhibited, the unmistakable clinking of glasses in a toast. the hum of overlapping voices. He was at a party, a loud, crowded, lively party, on a Thursday at nearly 3 in the afternoon, when he'd told me that morning before I left for work, still lying in bed, he'd be working all day in crucial meetings with potential partners who could finally bring in the funding we've been waiting for. But I didn't register the glaring discrepancy. Didn't register the obvious lie. I was too blinded by happiness, too deafened by excitement after years of struggle. Cameron, I shouted into the phone, my voice coming out high-pitched and hysterical, unrecognizable as my own. Cameron, you're not going to believe what just happened. You won't believe it. I was laughing and crying at once, words tripping over each other. Aunt Hattie, remember Aunt Hattie? Oh my God, Cameron, she left everything to me. Absolutely everything. The lawyer just told me. It's $29 million. Did you hear me? $29 million. We're rich. Finally, we're rich. We can pay off all the debts, invest in your company, buy a real house, travel, do everything we ever dreamed of. My God, Cameron, our lives just completely changed. There was a pause on the other end. Not the shocked, explosive joy I expected, not the scream of celebration, not the, oh my God, baby, that's incredible. You're kidding me. I had imagined the entire drive from the law office to the garage. It was silence, heavy, cold, calculating silence. It lasted maybe 3 or 4 seconds but felt like an eternity. I heard him take a slow, deliberate breath as if calming himself or thinking quickly or processing critical information. The music and laughter continued in the background but suddenly sounded distant, as if he'd stepped away from the noise. And when he finally spoke again, his voice had completely changed. Lower, controlled, urgent, but eerily calm. A tone I'd never heard from him before, one that should have warned me immediately, but didn't. Where exactly are you right now? He asked. Not, congratulations, baby. Not, that's unbelievable. Not, I can't wait for you to get home. Just, where are you? I found the question odd, but my adrenaline-soaked, euphoric brain didn't process how strange it was. I'm still in the parking garage at the lawyer's office downtown, I answered quickly, words tumbling over each other. I'm leaving right now. I'll drive straight home. We can sit and talk about everything, make plans, decide what to do first, maybe call a financial advisor, or no, he interrupted, his voice sharper, more urgent. Wait, no, don't do that. Just come straight home. Don't stop anywhere. Don't talk to anyone. Got it. Come straight here. Okay, yeah, of course. I agreed immediately, confused but obedient, like I'd always been through 10 years of marriage. I'm leaving right now. I'll be there in 20 minutes, depending on traffic and Jasmine. His voice dropped even lower, an urgent whisper that made my stomach twist in a way I couldn't identify. Yes, what is it? Don't tell anyone about this. You hear me? Absolutely no one. Not your sister Crystal, not your mom, no friends, no one from work, no one. This is our news. Just ours. Only ours. Do you understand perfectly? I should have found it strange. Should have asked why. Should have felt that first shiver of warning crawl up my spine. But I didn't feel anything except blind, grateful trust. I just thought, he's protecting us. He's being smart and strategic, as always. He doesn't want the family rushing in asking for money before we've had a chance to think clearly and make plans. How thoughtful, how careful. He's always 3 steps ahead. That's why I married him. Yes, of course I understand, I replied cheerfully, still floating in that naive, glowing happiness. It's completely ours. I won't tell a soul, I promise. Not a single word until we decide together what to do. I love you so much. I can't wait to get home and celebrate with you. I'm leaving now. Okay, he said, voice still strange and tense, and then he hung up. No, I love you too. No, drive safe. No, see you soon, baby. Just click hand dial tone. but I was too happy to notice. I placed my phone on the dashboard mount, wiped the tears of joy from my cheeks, adjusted the mirror, and started the car. It was exactly 2:47 p.m. when I drove out of that parking garage toward what I thought was the beginning of my new life, but was actually a carefully laid trap that almost cost me everything. The September sun in Atlanta was merciless that afternoon, the kind of suffocating, heavy heat that makes asphalt shimmer and blur on the horizon like phantom water. I turned on the radio, some pop station playing cheerful hits that perfectly matched my euphoric mood, and drove through the busy downtown streets. I passed Peachtree Street, with its tall glass buildings reflecting the blinding sun, and took the ramp onto Interstate 85 heading north, toward our rented apartment in Midtown. Traffic was surprisingly moderate for a Thursday afternoon, cars moving at a steady 60 miles per hour. 3 lanes flowing in chaotic but familiar choreography. I was in the middle lane, hands on the wheel at 10 and 2, like I'd learned in driver's ed at 16. The same smile still stitched to my face. My mind raced in 1,000 directions at once, making plans, imagining possibilities. First thing, pay off all of Cameron's credit cards. Second, maybe finally buy a new car, something reliable that didn't make that weird noise in the engine. Third, look for a real house to buy, not another rented apartment with thin walls where we could hear the neighbors fighting. My whole life was opening before me like a blooming flower, and I could barely breathe from the anticipation. That's when I saw it. In the rearview mirror, a truck, a Ford F-250, huge, intimidating, painted matte black that seemed to absorb light instead of reflect it, with giant lifted tires and a chrome bumper gleaming aggressively in the sun. It was 2 lanes to my left, in the fast lane, moving at the same speed as the rest of traffic. Nothing unusual. Trucks like that are common in the South, men with big toys compensating for something, I always thought. I didn't pay much attention. But then, while I was glancing casually at the mirror, just checking traffic like any careful driver does, the truck started moving. And it wasn't a normal, gradual lane change you see 1,000 times a day on the highway. It was deliberate, purposeful, almost aggressive. It swerved from the fast lane directly into the middle lane without signaling, without hesitation, in one smooth, decisive motion. Then, almost immediately, it crossed from the middle lane into mine, the slow lane, right behind me, and it stayed there. Close. Way too close. So close I could no longer see its chrome bumper in my rear view mirror, only the massive, menacing grille filling my entire view. My first reaction wasn't fear, it was irritation. Another aggressive jerk on the road, I thought. One of those guys with a giant truck who thinks he owns the highway and can bully smaller cars. Happens all the time in Atlanta. The traffic here is infamous for being aggressive. Everyone always in a hurry, always angry, always trying to get there 3 seconds faster. I decided to be the mature, responsible driver. I signaled right, started moving into the outer lane to let Mr. Big Truck pass and go on his impatient way. Simple, polite, defensive driving, exactly as I was taught. But as soon as I began changing lanes, something happened that made my stomach knot. The truck changed lanes too, at the exact same time. Into the exact same lane as me. Like it was following me, like it was mirroring my movements. My heart skipped uncomfortably. Okay, weird coincidence, I told myself. He probably just wants this lane too. He'll pass me now. But he didn't. He stayed right there. So close I could see details now. The windshield was dark tinted, impossible to see through. A Georgia plate, but from a county I didn't recognize. My heartbeat quickened. Okay, this is getting strange, I admitted silently. I decided to test it. I accelerated, not too much, just enough to create some safe distance between us. My old Honda groaned but obeyed, picking up speed. Expecting to see the truck shrinking behind me, slowing, disappearing, but it didn't. It sped up too, exactly matching my speed, maintaining that same impossible, uncomfortable distance. My stomach dropped. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't normal road rage. This was something else, something wrong. Very wrong. Panic began bubbling in my throat like acid. I tried something else. I slowed down, not a sudden brake, just took my foot off the gas. letting my car decelerate naturally. 70, 65, 60, 55. Cars began passing me in the middle lane, honking irritably. I looked in the mirror again, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. The truck slowed too. Still there. Still close. Still following. My heart pounded so hard I could hear blood rushing in my ears, drowning out the cheerful pop songs still absurdly playing on the radio. I turned the radio off with a trembling hand. I needed to think, to understand what was happening. It didn't make sense. Why would some random truck follow me? I looked around frantically. The road was full of cars. It was broad daylight. There were witnesses everywhere. He couldn't do anything here, right? Not in front of everyone. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe it was just a bizarre coincidence and my emotional state was making me see patterns that weren't there. Maybe the driver wasn't even paying attention to me and just happened to make the same lane choices. I tried convincing myself of that, tried slowing my breathing, tried rationalizing the fear crawling up my spine. But then I looked in the mirror again, and this shimmy for the first time I really saw him. The driver, or rather, his silhouette behind that dark glass, black cap. Big sunglasses covering half his face, a face impossible to describe, impossible to identify. Could have been anyone, but he wasn't looking at the road ahead. He was looking at me, right into my rearview mirror, into my eyes, through the reflection. Panic exploded, not a gradual build of anxiety, a full, instant detonation flooding my body with adrenaline. He's following me, on purpose, intentionally. This isn't coincidence. This isn't an accident. He's behind me. But why? Who is he? What does he want? My mind raced frantically, searching for explanations. Could it be a robbery? Did someone see me leaving that fancy law office and assume I was rich? But how would they know? A random stalker. But why me? Road rage from miles back. Nothing made sense, but all of it was terrifying. I needed to get out of this. Now, immediately, I saw an exit ahead, Piedmont Road, about half a mile away. Perfect. I'll take it. I'll get off the highway, go somewhere public, a gas station, a supermarket parking lot, somewhere with people, cameras, safety. He won't follow me there. He can't. That'll end this madness. I kept my speed steady, trying not to show I'd noticed, trying to act natural. The exit sign appeared, Piedmont Road, 500 feet. I turned on my blinker, started moving into the exit lane, and the truck followed. Exactly. Without hesitation. My blood turned to ice. No, no, no. This is really happening. He's really following me. This is real. I took the exit, tires squealing slightly on the curve. The truck took the exit too, keeping that same terrible, too close distance. I came off the ramp onto Piedmont Road, a busy street lined with traffic lights, shops, and people. Safety. I needed safety. I saw a Walmart up ahead, big, crowded, parking lot full of cars. Perfect. I'll pull in there, park right by the doors, run inside, and ask for help. I signaled to turn left into the parking lot, waited for the green light, turned. And when I looked in the rearview mirror, the truck was gone. Just gone. He hadn't followed me into the lot. He'd kept going straight down Piedmont Road and vanished into traffic. Gone as if he'd never existed. I parked in a spot near the entrance and turned off the engine, my hands shaking so badly the keys fell to the floor. I sat there breathing hard, heart racing, cold sweat running down my back even though the AC was still blowing. What the hell just happened? Am I losing my mind? Did I imagine it all? Was it stress-induced paranoia? I stayed there maybe 5-10 minutes just breathing, trying to calm down, trying to process. Gradually, my heartbeat slowed, my breathing steadied, the cold sweat dried, and slowly, very slowly, rationalization crept in. It was probably nothing, probably a weird coincidence, bad timing, and my overactive imagination turning a bad driver into some kind of movie villain. I'd just gotten news that changed my entire life. I was emotionally overloaded. Of course I wasn't thinking clearly, and besides, he was gone. If he'd really been following me, he would have turned into the parking lot too, right? The fact that he hadn't proved it was just coincidence. I convinced myself because I had to, because the alternative that someone was hunting me less than an hour after inheriting $29 million was too absurd, too terrifying to accept. I grabbed my phone, thought about calling Cameron to tell him what had happened, but he'd think I was being dramatic. He'd roll his eyes and say I was exaggerating again, and honestly, now that the immediate fear had passed, I was starting to think I had exaggerated. I put my phone away, took a deep breath, and got back on the road. This time, I took a different route, local streets, instead of the highway, slower, more careful, checking my rearview mirror every 3 seconds. No black truck. No Ford F250. Nothing suspicious. Just normal Atlanta traffic on a Thursday afternoon. Neighbors coming home from work, moms picking up kids from school, Amazon deliveries, ordinary life. Gradually, I relaxed again. When I finally reached our apartment building in Midtown, a 4-story red brick building without an elevator, and shared laundry in the basement, it was almost 4 p.m. A trip that normally took 20 minutes had taken over an hour. I parked in spot number 17, which we rented for $50 a month, turned off the engine, and sat for a moment staring at the familiar building. Home, safety. Cameron was upstairs waiting for me, wanting to hear everything about the money, to make plans for our future, to celebrate. Everything was going to be fine now. That strange incident on the road was just that, a strange incident. An anomaly. It was over. I grabbed my purse, locked the car, and climbed the 3 flights of stairs to our 3rd-floor apartment. When I opened the door to 3B, the first thing I noticed was the silence. Complete, heavy silence. No music. No TV. No sound of Cameron working on his computer or talking on the phone, like usual. "Cameron," I called, closing the door behind me and hanging my purse on the hook by the entryway. "I'm home! You're not going to believe the day I've had." No answer. The silence continued. "Cameron," I called louder, walking down the narrow hallway toward the living room. "You hear?" The living room was empty. The old couch we'd bought secondhand on Craigslist, the small TV sitting on a milk crate pretending to be a stand, the coffee table covered with business magazines he never read but liked to scatter around to look professional. Everything was in its place, but no one was there. I went to the bedroom. Empty. The bed unmade, just as he'd left it that morning. His clothes on the floor. No Cameron. I checked the tiny bathroom. Empty. Even peeked into the office. Really just a converted closet where he kept a folding desk and an old laptop. Empty. The entire apartment was empty. He wasn't home, but he told me to come straight home. He'd said we'd be together. Where was he? I went back to the living room, and that's when I saw it. On the coffee table, half hidden under one of his business magazines, a piece of paper. A handwritten note in his sloppy handwriting that I'd recognize anywhere. I picked it up and read, "Jess had to step out. Last-minute meeting I couldn't turn down. Important investor finally interested. Might take a while. Don't wait for dinner. We'll talk later." See, I stared at the note, confusion and disappointment twisting in my chest. A meeting. Now, today? On the day I'd just inherited $29 million, he'd told me specifically to come straight home. What kind of meeting could possibly be that important? And why hadn't he called to tell me? I checked my phone. No missed calls. No messages. Nothing. He'd just left and scribbled a note like it was any other day. The disappointment hurt more than I expected. I'd spent the entire drive imagining telling him in person, seeing his face, hugging him, celebrating together, and he wasn't even here. He was at some mysterious last-minute meeting that was apparently more important than me, than us, than our future that had just changed completely. I tried not to take it personally, tried to rationalize it. He didn't know I'd taken so long to get home. He probably thought I'd be there by 3, and when I wasn't, figured it was okay to step out for a bit. Besides, he was trying to build a business. Investors were important. He was doing this for us, for our future. I should have been proud that he was being proactive and professional, but something deep in my gut, small, quiet, uncomfortable, didn't buy it. Something felt wrong. I couldn't pinpoint what. but it did. The strange tone in his voice during the call, the urgent insistence that I tell no one about the money, the abrupt way he hung up without saying, "I love you." And now this not being home when he'd promised we'd be together. Little things that probably meant nothing. But together, they formed a pattern I couldn't completely ignore, no matter how hard I tried. I looked around the empty, silent apartment, and suddenly, I felt incredibly alone. More alone than I had in a long time. I picked up my phone and called his number. It rang 4 times, then went to voicemail. "Hey, you've reached Cameron. Leave a message." Beep. "Hey, babe," I said, trying to keep my voice cheerful despite the knot forming in my throat. "I got home, but you're not here. I saw your note. Call me when you can, okay? I really want to talk to you about everything. Love you." I hung up. I stood there in the middle of the living room, holding my phone, waiting for him to call back, to walk through the door, to show up somehow. But the apartment stayed empty and silent. And deep down in that quiet place where intuition lives, a small voice whispered something I didn't want to hear. "He's lying to you." That night, I barely slept. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, watching the faint glow from the streetlights flicker through the blinds. Every sound outside made me flinch: the distant rumble of a passing car, a neighbor's door slamming, footsteps in the hallway. Cameron didn't come home until after 2 in the morning. When he finally walked in, I pretended to be asleep. I could smell alcohol on him, that sharp mix of whiskey and something sweet, maybe perfume. He moved quietly, almost too quietly, like someone performing silence rather than living it. Drawers opened, then closed. The floor creaked as he undressed. The mattress dipped beside me, and I felt his body heat before I heard his whisper. "Hey," he said softly. "You awake?" I didn't answer. I kept my breathing slow and even, my eyes closed, my heart pounding against the pillow. He lay there for a moment, maybe waiting for me to respond. Then he sighed a long, heavy sigh and turned away. Within minutes, his breathing deepened into the slow rhythm of sleep, or at least the performance of it. I stayed awake until dawn. When morning came, I got up quietly, took a shower, and left for work without waking him. There was an uneasiness in the air between us, invisible but heavy, like humidity before a storm. I kept replaying everything in my head. The black truck, the urgent tone in his voice, the sudden meeting, the note, pieces that didn't fit together no matter how I turned them. At lunch, I couldn't resist. I called his phone. It went straight to voicemail. I texted, "How's your meeting?" No response. Hours passed. At 3:15 p.m., I checked again. Message still unread. At 4 o'clock, I opened Instagram. He wasn't a frequent poster, usually just pictures of his business meetings or motivational quotes, but I checked anyway. Nothing new. Then I noticed a story posted by his business partner, Ryan, a short video clip. They were at a bar, laughing, drinking, music blasting. Cameron right there, smiling at the camera, glass in hand, no sign of stress or responsibility. The caption read, "Big deals, big energy." My stomach twisted. So that's where he'd been. Not a meeting, not an investor. Middle of the afternoon. Celebrating what? Exactly. I locked my phone screen and sat back in my chair. I felt stupid. So stupid. How many times had I believed his stories? How many meetings, late-night calls, business trips had really been drinks with Ryan or whoever else he needed to impress that week? I told myself it didn't matter anymore. That soon, with the inheritance, we'd have a fresh start. Money changes everything, right? He'd be happier. We'd both be less stressed. Maybe that would fix whatever was broken between us. But deep down, I already knew the truth. Money doesn't fix people. It just shows who they really are. When I got home that evening, Cameron was in the kitchen cooking pasta, humming softly like everything was normal. "Hey, beautiful," he said, flashing that easy grin that used to melt me. "How was your day?" "Fine," I answered, dropping my purse on the counter. "You? Great," he said, stirring the pot. "Made some progress today. Might have an investor lined up soon." "Really?" I asked. "Was that during your meeting?" He froze for half a second, then smiled again, too quickly. Yeah? Why? I leaned against the counter, arms crossed, because I saw Ryan's story. Looked more like a bar than a boardroom. His smile faltered. He turned off the stove, slowly. You checking up on me now? Just saying what I saw. Jesus, Jas. He laughed, but it wasn't funny. You always twist everything. I can't even celebrate potential deals with a friend without being interrogated. I just thought you'd want to tell me the truth, I said quietly. He slammed the wooden spoon onto the counter. The sound made me jump. Truth, he snapped. You think you own the truth now because you've got a lawyer and some money coming your way? You think that makes you better than me? The words stung. Not because of what he said, but how he said is sharp, resentful, almost hateful. Cameron, that's not fair, I said. I've always been on your side. Always. He looked at me for a long time, jaw tight, eyes cold. Then, suddenly, his tone soft. Yeah, he said, smiling faintly. You're right. I'm sorry. Stress talking. You know how it is. He stepped closer, placed his hands on my shoulders, and kissed my forehead. The gesture felt wrong, too deliberate, too rehearsed. His smile didn't reach his eyes. I love you, he murmured. I love you too, I answered, automatically. But something deep inside me whispered, you don't believe that anymore. Over the next few days, small things started to happen. Little things that shouldn't have meant anything on their own. But together they began to form a pattern. Cameron started asking oddly specific questions about the trust. When exactly would I have access? Which bank was handling the transfer? Did the lawyer say if there'd be online access to the funds? At first, I thought he was just curious. Then I realized he wasn't asking because he was excited for me. He was asking because he was planning something. Every conversation felt like a test, like he was mapping my answers, calculating next steps. He also started acting different, colder, detached. He used to text me during the day, small things, jokes, little love you messages. Now, nothing. At night, he'd stay up late in his so-called office, door closed, laptop screen glowing through the crack. When I asked what he was working on, he'd shrugged and say, stuff you wouldn't understand. I started feeling like a guest in my own home, like an intruder. The man who used to fall asleep with his arm around me now barely looked me in the eye. When he did, there was something new in his gaze, something calculating, predatory. One evening, while he was in the shower, I noticed his phone on the kitchen counter. Unlocked, it felt like a sin to touch it. I'd never gone through his things before, but curiosity, fear, and instinct blended into something stronger than guilt. I picked it up, opened messages, scrolled. Most were harmless Ryan, a few old friends, random group chats. Then I saw one name that froze me. Christo, my sister. He and Crystal rarely texted. They were cordial, friendly at family gatherings, but nothing more. I clicked the thread, and what I saw made my skin crawl. It wasn't sexual, thank God, but it was intimate in another way. Dozens of messages over the past week. Some casual, some coded. Did she tell you anything yet? Not much. She's keeping it quiet. Good. Keep her calm. We need her trusting you. She does. For now. My breath caught. For now. I scrolled further. The conversation went back days, mentions of me, of the lawyer, of timing. And the last message from Crystal read, don't rush. She'll sign whatever you put in front of her if she thinks it's for both of you. I dropped the phone like it had burned me. The room tilted. For a moment, all sound disappeared, just my heartbeat, pounding, deafening, in my ears. My own husband, my sister. Together, plotting something behind my back. I didn't know what exactly, but it reeked of betrayal. I heard the shower stop. Panic surged through me. I grabbed the phone, set it back exactly where it had been. Screen down. Ran to the couch, sat, grabbed a magazine, pretended to read. My heart hammered. He came out minutes later, towel around his waist, steam following him. Hey, he said casually. You okay? You look pale. I forced a smile. Just tired. He nodded, walked past me to the bedroom. Didn't notice a thing. Didn't know I knew? Not yet. I sat there in the silence, staring at nothing, trying to breathe, trying to make sense of what I'd just seen. But all I could think, over and over, was one question. What are they planning? Sunday morning, I woke up on the couch where I'd passed out from exhaustion after crying for 3 straight hours. My body was stiff and sore, my eyes swollen, my throat raw. I grabbed my phone 7 a.m., no message from Cameron, no missed calls, nothing. He'd probably slept in a hotel somewhere, comfortable and at peace, while I'd spent the night blaming myself, wondering if I was being unfair, paranoid, controlling. Maybe he was right. Maybe I didn't trust him enough. Maybe I should have been happy he was being proactive about investments instead of questioning every move. But that voice, the damned voice of intuition that wouldn't leave me alone, kept whispering, he's lying. He's hiding something. And you know it. I got up slowly, every muscle protesting, and dragged myself to the bathroom. I looked in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. Pale face, red swollen eyes, hair a tangled mess. I looked sick or insane. I took a long, hot shower, trying to wash off the drowning feeling that had settled on my chest like concrete. It didn't help. When I stepped out, I still felt broken inside, like something fundamental in me had cracked and I didn't know how to fix it. At 9 a.m., I tried calling Cameron, straight to voicemail. I texted, "Can we talk, please? I don't want to fight. I just want to understand." Message delivered, not read. At 10, I called again. Voicemail. By 11, anger started replacing guilt. He was ignoring me, deliberately, punishing me for daring to question him. It was a tactic he used sometimes over the years when he got mad. He'd freeze me out for days until I broke and apologized for whatever he decided was my fault. Silent treatment, weaponized emotional control, and I always caved first, because I couldn't stand the silence. But this time, something was different. This time the anger wasn't just boiling, it was hardening into something cold and determined. He wasn't going to ignore me about $29 million that were mine. I grabbed my phone and called Hayes and Associates. It was Sandy, obviously closed, but I left a voicemail asking Mr. Hayes to call me first thing Monday morning. I had questions, important ones about the trust, about asset protection, about what exactly would happen once the money officially transferred to me. I spent the rest of Sunday trying to distract myself by cleaning obsessively, washing clothes that didn't need washing, organizing closets that were already organized, anything to keep my hands busy and my mind away from the spiral. But no matter what I did, my thoughts always circled back to the same realization. My marriage was falling apart, and I didn't even know when it started. Had it been gradual? Tiny cracks I ignored, or Seduna's switch flipping in Cameron's head the moment he learned about the money. By 6 p.m., still no word from him. I finally stopped pretending I was fine. I grabbed my old laptop from the coffee table and opened the browser. I needed information. ISAT. Is inheritance considered marital property in Georgia? The answer startled me and relieved me at the same time. Georgia is a separate property state, not community property. Inheritance received by one spouse during marriage usually remains that spouse's separate property. The funds are mixed with marital assets, like being deposited into a joint account or used for shared benefit, which meant, legally, the $29 million were mine. Completely mine. Cameron had no automatic legal right to it. That changed everything. Did he know that? Was that why he was pushing me to transfer the money into our joint account right away? To turn my separate property into marital property he could claim in a divorce. The word divorce appeared in my mind for the first time, and it terrified me. I wasn't thinking about divorce. I wasn't even considering it. I was just trying to understand, trying to protect myself. But the more I read, the worse I felt. I searched, signs your spouse is planning a divorce. The list appeared: sudden behavioral changes, increased secrecy, password changes, spending more time away, creating emotional distance, hiding assets, consulting lawyers secretly, every box checked. My stomach turned. Was that it? Was Cameron planning to leave me, but waiting until he could claim part of the money? The thought was absurd and horrifyingly possible. I slammed the laptop shut, heart racing. No, he wouldn't. Not after 10 years. Not the man who promised to love me, for better or worse. But that inner voice whispered again, "Till inheritance do you part." Monday morning, oi tui kingzi. My phone rang, unknown number. I answered with shaking hands. "Ms. Reynolds, this is Harold Hayes. I got your message. How can I help?" His calm, professional voice was strangely comforting. "Mr. Hayes," I began, my voice weaker than I intended. I cleared my throat. "I have questions about the trust, about protection, about my rights." "Of course," he said gently. "What kind of protection are you looking for?" I hesitated. How could I explain without sounding paranoid? "My husband wants me to transfer the funds into a joint account as soon as they're released. But I read that inheritance is separate property in Georgia. Is that true?" "Absolutely true," he confirmed. "The trust is yours alone. Your husband has no legal claim unless you choose to share it by depositing it into a joint account or using it for joint purposes." "And if I don't want to do that?" I asked. "That's entirely your right," he said firmly. "In fact, Ms. Reynolds, I'd advise you to keep it separate, at least initially. It prevents future complications." "What kind of complications?" I pressed, though I already knew. A pause. Then, "May I be frank, please?" In 40 years of practice, I've seen countless marriages change, sometimes drastically, when large sums of money enter the picture. People who seemed trustworthy suddenly show sides their spouses never imagined. I'm not saying that's your husband, but there's no shame in being cautious. Tears stung my eyes. He was validating everything everyone else told me was paranoia. "So, what do you recommend?" "I recommend keeping the funds separate, in your name only. Consult both an estate attorney and a family attorney before making any major decisions. And most importantly, Ms. Reynolds, trust your instincts. If something feels off, it probably is." When we hung up, I felt a strange mix of relief and terror. I wasn't crazy, but I was right to be afraid. At 9:30, I was sitting in the living room when I heard the key in the lock. Cameron walked in, rested and calm, as if he hadn't abandoned me all weekend. "Hey," he said casually, tossing his keys on the table. "You calmed down yet?" The arrogance in his tone lit a fire in me. "Calmed down," I repeated quietly. "Cameron, you disappeared for 2 days. Ignored me. Treated me like I was hysterical for wanting a say over my money." "Our money," he corrected automatically, tension in his voice now. "My money," I corrected back. "Legally, Cameron. In Georgia, inheritance is separate property." I spoke to a lawyer. His expression changed instantly. The casual facade dropped. "You spoke to a lawyer?" His voice went low. "Dangerous." "Without telling me." "You spoke to financial advisors without telling me," I shot back. "Sing me he fe." "Your rights," he repeated, almost spitting the words. "Since when did it become yours and mine instead of ours?" "Since you started acting like this money was yours to control," I snapped. "Since you started hiding things, changing passwords, avoiding me." "You're paranoid," he shouted, "exactly like your sister said you'd be." The words hit me like ice water. "You talked to Crystal about this?" "Of course I did," he said, folding his arms. "She called Saturday, worried about you. We had a good talk. She agrees you're stressed and projecting." Betrayal cut deep. My own sister talking about me with my husband, labeling my fears as hysteria. "So you both decided I'm crazy?" I asked, voice breaking. "Nobody said crazy," he replied, but his tone was the one people use with children. "Just overwhelmed. You need to let me handle the complicated stuff while you adjust." "While I adjust," I repeated slowly. "You mean while you take control of my money and treat me like I'm incompetent? Don't twist my words." He was yelling now, face red. "I'm trying to help you. I'm protecting our future, but you're too paranoid to see it." "If you were protecting me," I shouted back, "you wouldn't have disappeared. You wouldn't have changed your passwords. You wouldn't have lied." Silence fell, thick and poisonous. We stood facing each other, breathing hard. Then Cameron did something he'd never done before. He laughed. Not with humor, with cruelty. You really think I'm the villain here? He said, shaking his head. You who barely scrape by on a non-profit salary, you think you know more about handling millions than I do. At least I have a job. I shot back, surprising myself. At least I'm not 3 years into a startup that doesn't exist while my wife pays every bill. His face went white, then red. For a second, I saw something in his eyes, pure unfiltered rage. Then the mask slid back on. Wow, he said coldly. So, that's what you really think of me. After 10 years, now that you've got money. I'm just a failure. That's not what I said. It's exactly what you said. He cut me off. Now it all makes sense. You don't want my help. You want me out. You think you don't need me anymore? Cameron, that's not, forget it, he said, grabbing his keys again. Maybe this whole marriage was a mistake. And for the second time in 3 days, he slammed the door behind him. I collapsed on the floor, sobbing until no tears were left. My marriage was ending. 10 years, ending. And I didn't even know who was wrong anymore. Was I paranoid? Or was I finally seeing the truth? I didn't trust my own judgment anymore. When I finally looked at the clock, it was 4 p.m. I'd missed an entire day of work. For the first time in 10 years at the nonprofit, I hadn't even called in. But I didn't care. Nothing mattered. I dragged myself to bed and stared at the ceiling. The kind of emptiness I felt was worse than pain. I scrolled through my contacts aimlessly. Who could I call? Crystal had chosen him. Mom would say to be a better wife. My friends Kamiran had found reasons to push them all away. I was completely, utterly alone. Then came the thought, dark and terrifying in its simplicity. Wouldn't it be easier if I just didn't exist anymore? If I disappeared, Cameron could live his life without me, and I wouldn't have to carry this unbearable weight of pain and confusion. It would be easier for everyone. I sat up, horrified by my own mind. No, I couldn't think like that. But once planted, the thought grew like a weed. I stumbled to the bathroom, opened the medicine cabinet. There was a bottle of Ambien I'd been prescribed last year. 23 pills left. Would that be enough? I picked up the bottle, staring at the small white pills through the orange plastic. It would be so easy. So quiet. So final. My phone rang, startling me. The bottle nearly slipped from my hand. Unknown number. For a second, I almost didn't answer. But something made me press green. Hello. My voice was hoarse. Ms. Reynolds, Harold Hayes again. I'm sorry to bother you, but something urgent came up. Are you in a private place where you can talk? Yes, I said automatically, still holding the pill bottle. What is it? We received a concerning call this morning from a banking contact. Someone tried to access confidential information about the Hattie Washington Trust using unauthorized credentials. The attempt was blocked, but it was traced back to a computer registered to Cameron Stone. The world stopped. What? Your husband attempted to access your trust this morning. He was specifically looking for the transfer schedule and destination account. When the system blocked him, he called our office pretending to be your attorney. Thankfully, my secretary refused to release any details. My hands started shaking. The pill bottle fell and rolled across the tile. He tried to steal from me. Attempted unauthorized access, Hayes said carefully, which could constitute fraud depending on intent. Ms. Reynolds, I need to escort you. Safe. The question hit me like a train. I don't know, I whispered. Not anymore. Are you alone right now? Yes. Does your husband have access to your apartment? Yes. He lives here. A long pause. Ms. Reynolds, I don't want to alarm you, but based on what you've described and this morning's attempt, think you should consider staying somewhere else tonight, just until we assess the situation. You think he's dangerous? I asked weakly, though part of me already knew. I think he's showing behavior that suggests desperation, Hayes said carefully. And desperate people can become unpredictable. Please, stay with family or a friend tonight. Tomorrow, I'd like to schedule an emergency meeting to discuss legal protections. After hanging up, I sat on the edge of the tub, staring at the pill bottle on the floor. Minutes ago, I'd been ready to end it all. Now, I had terrifying clarity. I couldn't give up. Not now. Not when I finally saw how deep Cameron's betrayal went. He wasn't just evasive or controlling. He was actively trying to steal from me. And if Hayes was right, if Cameron was capable of fraud, what else was he capable of? I picked up the bottle and threw it in the trash. Not today. Not like this. If Cameron wanted to destroy me, I wouldn't make it easy. I would fight. But fight what exactly? And how? I looked at my reflection in the mirror. The woman staring back looked 10 years older than she had a week ago, pale, hollow-eyed, haunted, but there was something else there now. Something harder, more determined. I grabbed my phone and called Hayes back. Mr. Hayes, about that emergency meeting tomorrow, I want to add a divorce attorney too, because I think I'm going to need one. As I scheduled it, I heard the key turn in the front door. Cameron was back. I hung up fast and stepped out of the bathroom, heart pounding. He walked in, and for the first time in 10 years, I looked at my husband and felt real fear. "We need to talk," he said, and there was something in his voice, something cold and final, that made every hair on my body stand on end. And in that moment, looking into his eyes, I knew one thing for certain. I was in danger. Real danger. And I was completely alone to face it. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard his voice, echoing calm cold, rehearsed, "Maybe this marriage was a mistake." The words circled like vultures over a carcass. By sunrise, I knew something inside me had snapped. The fear that once paralyzed me had turned into quiet, deliberate resolve. I wasn't sure what I was going to do yet, but for the first time in months, I knew what I wouldn't do. I wouldn't let Cameron destroy me. Not financially, not emotionally, not anymore. I got up before dawn and started moving through the apartment like a ghost. Every sound felt too loud. The smell of his cologne lingered near the door, sharp and nauseating. I opened all the windows just to breathe. There was a part of me that still couldn't accept that the man I built my life around had become my biggest threat. I kept whispering, no, he wouldn't. He couldn't. But he already had. The trust attempt, the lies, the manipulation, it was all real. I wasn't imagining any of it. At 7 a.m., I texted Hayes, "I'm ready for the meeting. Please add the divorce attorney." He replied almost instantly. Confirmed. 10 a.m. at our office. And, meu. Reynolds, don't come alone. I didn't know who else to bring. My sister was out of the question. My mother lived 2 hours away and thought every marital problem could be fixed with prayer. So I called the only person I trusted from work, Nadia, the HR director. She answered on the second ring. "Jess, you okay?" she asked, her voice instantly alert. "No," I said quietly, "but I need help." By 9:30, I was sitting in Hayes's office, clutching a coffee I couldn't drink. The divorce attorney, a woman named Rachel Bloom, arrived moments later, mid-40s, sharp eyes, calm demeanor, the kind of woman who didn't flinch under pressure. She shook my hand firmly. "I've reviewed Mr. Hayes's notes," she said. "You're making the right move." The right move. The words landed heavy. "I'm terrified," I admitted. "That's normal," she said gently. "You're not just ending a marriage, you're reclaiming your life." We discussed legal strategy for over an hour. Rachel explained protective measures, changing passwords, securing finances, ensuring physical safety. "Do not confront him about the divorce until you've secured everything," she warned. "If he's desperate, that's when he'll act irrationally." Hayes nodded in agreement. "Your first step is to open a new account in your name only. Transfer essential funds there immediately. We'll handle the trust separately through legal channels." It was also procedural, yet every word felt like armor being forged around me. When I left the office, I felt lighter and heavier at the same time. The sky was overcast, the kind of gray that looks like the world's holding its breath. I drove home in silence, rehearsing what I'd say if Cameron was there. But when I entered, the apartment was empty. His suitcase was gone, his clothes half missing. A note sat on the counter. "I need space. Don't call me." No signature, just that. I read it twice, then folded it neatly and placed it in the drawer with the rest of his broken promises. For the next 2 days, I operated on autopilot, work, lawyer calls, safety planning. I changed the locks. I updated my passwords. I told my boss I needed time off. Every practical action was a small rebellion against the version of me that once begged for his attention. But at night, when the world went quiet, the grief came like waves, raw, relentless. I cried not just for the marriage, but for the years I'd spent believing in something that never existed. On the third day, Rachel called with news. We served the preliminary notice. Cameron's officially aware of the proceedings. My stomach dropped. How did he take it? His lawyer responded within minutes, she said. He's contesting the trust, claims it's joint marital property. I almost laughed a sharp, broken sound. He's insane, I muttered. Desperate, she corrected. And desperate people make mistakes. Let him. That night, I dreamed of fire. Our wedding album burned in slow motion, the pages curling inward. When I woke, my pillow was soaked with tears. I sat up, feeling something shift inside me. For months, I'd been reacting to Cameron, his mooth, his lies, his threats. But now, something else was emerging. Not anger, not even revenge. It was survival. The quiet, primal instinct to live, to rebuild, to rise. The next morning, I made a list titled Reconstruction. It had 3 columns: financial, emotional, spiritual. Under each, I wrote one sentence: protect what's mine, reclaim who I am, forgive myself for not leaving sooner. I taped it to the refrigerator where the wedding photo used to hang. It felt symbolic, like erasing a curse. At noon, Nadia stopped by with lunch. She looked around the half-empty apartment and said softly, "It feels different in here." "It is," I replied. "I changed the locks." She smiled faintly. "Good. That's how freedom starts, quietly." We sat on the floor, eating in silence for a while. "You know," she said finally, "you don't have to be strong all the time." "If I stop being strong, I'll fall apart," I whispered. "Then fall apart," she said simply. "Just don't stay there." That night, I lit a candle and sat on the balcony with a blanket around my shoulders. The city hummed below, indifferent and alive. For the first time, I didn't feel invisible in it. I felt small, yes, but present. Real. I whispered to myself, "You're not broken, you're waking up." It wasn't a declaration, it was a promise. The following morning, Hayes called again. "Ms. Reynolds," he said, "I've received confirmation. Cameron attempted to liquidate one of your smaller investment accounts last night. We froze it before processing." My blood ran cold. "He's not stopping," I said. "No," Hayes agreed. "He won't stop until he's out of options, which means you need to prepare for escalation." I nodded silently, gripping the phone. "Then let him escalate," I said. "I'm done running." That afternoon, I met Rachel again. We finalized paperwork, secured additional injunctions, and discussed a restraining order if needed. As we wrapped up, she looked at me over her glasses. "You're stronger than you think," she said. "No," I corrected softly. "I'm just done being weak." When I got home, I walked into the bedroom and stood in front of the mirror. The woman staring back wasn't the same one who'd begged Cameron to love her. Her eyes were sharper. Her jaw, said she. There was pain there, yes, but also something new. Power. I exhaled deeply, touched my reflection, and whispered, "It's time." At that exact moment, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I hesitated, then answered, "Hello?" A pause, then his voice. "Jas," Cameron said quietly, "we need to talk." My heart froze. "About what?" "About everything," he said, his tone unreadable. "And before you hang up, just know I know where you've been today. You shouldn't have gone to Hayes." I felt the blood drain from my face. "Cameron," I whispered. "How do you know that?" He chuckled softly. "Because I'm always watching Jas. Always." And just like that, the fragile calm I'd built shattered. He wasn't gone. He was watching, waiting, planning, and for the first time, I realized this wasn't over. It was just beginning. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. My hands were trembling as I made coffee, the same way they used to when I feared him, but this chimney, the shaking wasn't from fear. It was adrenaline. Purpose. For the first time in months, I had a plan. I grabbed my notebook, sat at the kitchen counter, and started writing everything I needed to do. Step by step. No more reacting. Only acting. By 9, I was at the bank. I opened a new account in my name only, transferring what little savings I had left. The teller looked at me kindly, like she could sense I was starting over. New beginnings, she said softly as she handed me the paperwork. I smiled back weakly, not trusting my voice. From there, I drove to the storage unit. Cameron never knew about the one I'd rented years ago to keep a few personal boxers safe. I started moving my important documents there: birth certificate, passport, trust papers, laptop backups. Every motion felt mechanical, deliberate, necessary. Back home, I began packing small things: clothes, photos, mementos into plain brown boxers. The apartment felt hollow, stripped of its disguise. I realized how much of our life together was built on illusion. The fake smiles, the Instagram-worthy dinners, the birthday posts captioned my everything. It had all been theater. I had been both the actor and the audience, applauding my own denial. By the second week, Cameron's messages changed tone. First came the apologies. I overreacted. Let's talk. Then the guilt trips. After everything I did for you. Then the threats. You'll regret this. I stopped replying altogether. Silence became my weapon. Every time I didn't respond, I took back a piece of power he'd stolen. But silence has its own kind of danger. It leaves space for obsession to grow. On Friday evening, I came home to find a note slipped under the door. My name in his handwriting. I froze. Inside, 2 lines. You think you're safe because you have money? You're not. I'll make sure of it. My knees buckled. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Then, instinct took over. I called Rachel. She told me to photograph the note, email it, and not touch anything else. We'll escalate immediately, she said firmly. Her voice was calm, steady. Mine was shaking. That night, I slept with every light on. I jumped at every sound. The hum of the refrigerator, the creak of pipes. My own heartbeat sounded too loud. But even through the fear, a part of me knew this was his last weapon, and I wouldn't let him win this round. Over the next few days, I worked closely with Rachel and Hayes. They secured a restraining order and contacted private security to monitor the building. Every day felt like walking a tightrope between courage and collapse. Sometimes I broke down in the shower, sobbing so quietly that even the water couldn't drown it out. But when I looked in the mirror afterward, I saw someone I didn't recognize, a woman made of scars and survival. Nadia visited again one afternoon. She brought groceries and sat cross-legged on my couch. You're glowing, she said with a smile. I laughed bitterly. That's just exhaustion disguised as enlightenment. She shook her head. No, that's what freedom looks like before it becomes comfortable. Her words hit me somewhere deep. Freedom wasn't instant joy. It was the slow, painful process of learning to exist without fear. A week later, Hayes called with updates. We traced the note, he said. Security cameras caught him near your building the same night. My heart sank. Is he in jail? I asked. Not yet, but we're close. His voice softened. Jasmine, this is the final stretch. Stay alert. Final stretch. The words carried both relief and dread. That evening, I went for a walk, something I hadn't done alone in months. The air was cool, filled with the smell of rain and city smoke. I passed a bookstore and stopped at the window. A quote was painted across the glass in white letters. She remembered who she was, and the game changed. I stood there for a long time, reading it over and over, until I realized I was smiling. When I got back home, my phone was buzzing. Unknown number again. I almost ignored it, but something curiosity, defiance made me answer. Hello, silence, then breathing. Then his voice. You're not hard to find, Jess. My throat tightened. What do you want? I demanded. You took everything from me, he said flatly. Now, I'm just taking back what's mine. Click. The line went dead. I stared at the phone for a long time before calling Rachel again. Her tone turned serious. Pack a bag. Go stay with someone tonight. We'll coordinate with the police. I didn't argue. Within Hanau, I was at Nadia's apartment, clutching a single duffel bag, the same one I'd packed years ago for romantic weekends with Cameron. Now it carried my survival. At 2 a.m., my phone buzzed again. A text, no words, just a photo. My car, parked outside Nadia's building, my heart nearly stopped. I ran to the window, peering through the blinds. The street was empty. No movement, no sound. But I knew he was close, watching, waiting. And for the first time, the fear he'd done paralyzed me. It sharpened me. I turned to Nadia, who had woken up, alarmed by the noise. "We're calling the police," I said firmly. "I'm done running." As she dialed, I looked out the window one more time and whispered to myself, "You wanted a fight, Cameron? You've got one." Outside, the city lights flickered in gold and shadow. The storm wasn't over. But I was no longer the woman who needed saving. I was the storm. When the trial finally ended, and the judge's gavel struck for the last time, the sound didn't echo like punishment, it sounded like release. For months, I had imagined that moment, but nothing could have prepared me for the stillness that followed. No applause, no tears, just silence, thick and holy, like the pause between two lives, the old one that died, and the one that was just beginning to breathe. Cameron didn't look at me when they led him out in handcuffs. His eyes stayed fixed somewhere beyond the courtroom wall, as if trying to rewrite reality one last time. Crystal sobbed quietly beside her lawyer. Ryan stared straight ahead, jaw tight, pretending to be brave. They looked small, not evil, just lots, the kind of loss that devours everything around it, and for the first time, I didn't feel anger. I felt distance. The kind that comes when you finally step out of the storm and realize it was never yours to carry. Outside, the Atlanta sky was gray and heavy, threatening rain. I stood on the courthouse steps, with Rachel and Nadia beside me. The reporters shouted my name, cameras flashing, microphones thrust forward, but their voices barely reached me. I wasn't there for them. I was there for the woman I used to be, the one who had believed that love was supposed to hurt, that loyalty meant silence, that forgiveness was weakness. I wanted her to see me standing there, alive, unbroken. That night, I went home to my apartment, my real home, the one I'd found after leaving everything behind. It was small but warm, filled with things that were mine alone. A thrifted lamp with a cracked shade, an old record player, a potted plant that refused to die. I poured a glass of wine and sat by the window, watching the rain finally fall. The city lights blurred into streaks of gold and blue. It looked like the world was washing itself clean. I thought about everything that had happened, the inheritance, the lies, the betrayal, the fear, how a single phone call had torn my life apart and somehow stitched it back together stronger than before. Pain had become my teacher. Loss had become my compass. And somewhere between survival and surrender, I had found myself again. The next morning, I drove to East Point, where my Aunt Hattie's house still stood empty and fading. The yard was overgrown, the paint chipped, but the air smelled like jasmine and earth, the way it always had. I walked through the rooms, running my fingers along the old furniture, the wallpaper peeling at the edges. This was where it all began, the woman who lived quietly, invested wisely, and left me everything without ever saying a word. In her bedroom, on the dresser, I found something I hadn't noticed before, a sealed envelope with my name written in her delicate, looping handwriting. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside, a short letter. "My dearest Jasmine, if you are reading this, it means you found your strength. Money can change your circumstances, but courage changes your life. I chose you not because you needed it, but because you would know what to do with it. Live fully, love wisely, and never forget you are your own miracle. Love, Aunt Hattie." Tears blurred the words until they became a soft blur of ink and memory. I sat on her bed for a long time, holding that letter like a lifeline between two worlds, hers and Mini. It felt like closure, like blessing, like permission to finally let go. On the drive back to the city, the sun broke through the clouds. Light spilled across the highway, golden and infinite. I rolled down the window and let the wind whip through my hair, carrying away everything I no longer needed: fear, guilt, grief, the ghost of who I had been. For the first time in a long time, I laughed. A deep, reckless laugh that came from somewhere ancient and free. That night, I wrote again, not in a journal this time, but in a book. My book, the story of what happened, not for revenge, not for fame, but for the truth. For every woman who ever looked in the mirror and wondered if surviving was enough. For every heart that mistook manipulation for love. For every quiet soul who forgot that silence is not peace. Months later, when the book was published, messages began to pour in. Letters, emails, women from all over the country. Some said my story gave them courage to leave. Others said it helped them forgive themselves for staying. Each message felt like a small light in a dark room, and I realized something. Healing doesn't happen alone. It happens in echoes. One evening, after a long signing event, I went for a walk through Piedmont Park. The air smelled like summer rain and honeysuckle. I passed a couple laughing on a bench, a little boy chasing pigeons, an old man feeding ducks. Life, in its quiet ordinariness, felt miraculous again. I sat on the grass, barefoot, watching the sun dip behind the skyline. And in that moment, I finally understood what Aunt Hattie had meant. The miracle wasn't the money. It wasn't the justice. It wasn't even survival. The miracle was remembering who I was before the world taught me to forget. The miracle was peace. I stayed there until the sky turned indigo and the city lights flickered on one by one. The past no longer pulled at me. The fear no longer whispered. Only the wind remained soft, forgiving, and endlessly alive. So I closed my eyes, breathed deeply, and whispered into the dusk, "I'm free."